Hey you guys, welcome to book review 104. Today I will be reviewing a Comrade Lost and Found, a Beijing Story by Wong. I don't know if you can see that. Well anyway, this is Jan's, I don't know, 7th or 8th book on China. I'm not sure she has that many, but the reason I say that is she's very much an old hand in China. Kind of the premise of the book was she was a young Maoist, a true believer, if you will, back in the late 60s, early 70s, being Chinese American, let's see, actually Chinese Canadian, and decided to move from Canada to China to study at Beijing University during the height of the Cultural Revolution. Now, since she had moved back to Canada, kind of become disenchanted with Maoism, not only because in Canada, but also because of her time spent at Beijing University, and kind of regretted some of her ways, some of the things she did. She's since become a successful writer. But one of the regrets that she had at her time at Beijing University was she ratted out a fellow student in a, not really a struggle session. Actually, the student approached her because she was from Canada, being in proximity to the United States, and asked her how she could get out of China into, this is a fellow Beijing University student, to the United States. Now, if you know anything about the Cultural Revolution at this time, it was Alice in Wonderland, but not in a good way. It was topsy-turvy, it was Orwellian, it was just truly terrible. You know, like young children would rat on their parents, and those parents would be sent off to gulags or work camps for the rest of their lives. Any sort of perceived power structure, in many cases justified, such as, you know, university administration or leaders in economy and commerce, civic leaders, pretty much anybody and everybody that could be pulled from power and put in a terrible circumstance was. And anyone that was perceived as an American running dog, that went against the hard left ideology of Maoism, was immediately vilified. If it was seen as too severe, was executed. If not as severe, was often, as I said, sent to labor camps. In communist China, you got kind of your work status was determined by the government, just because everything was controlled by the government. It's a communist state. And if you got a black mark on your resume, you could be banished for any sort of advancement or career life. I mean, it wasn't, well, often it literally was a death sentence, but if it wasn't literally a death sentence, it was often metaphorically a death sentence. Well, anyway, Jan ratted on one of her fellow students. I believe her name was Yin or Yan, and she had since come back to, the music's kind of loud, she since came back to the United States, or back to China, to find this woman. Now, she had come back to China multiple times before, but this was the first time that she specifically went with the mission of finding this woman and reconciling her past from the Cultural Revolution. She finds, let's see, Scarlet, dead, or lacking Pan virtue, another administrator whose name I can't remember. But basically, the long and short of it is that everyone, to a degree, was culpable during the Cultural Revolution of some sort of evil, of some sort of telling on or spying on, or just sort of the paranoid police state. But really kind of what separated, I felt, people during that time period was it even goes beyond ideology of like Marxism, or it's kind of Maoism, but what it really is do you really by hook, line, and sinker to the point that you're willing to injure your fellow human being and lack empathy for your fellow human being? Do you take joy or pain in ratting people out? Do you take joy and pain, or joy and pain? Do you take joy in the pain of other people? And really what this line came down to was the people that followed the Maoist line. Well, there's really three groups. There's the people that followed the Maoist line but didn't really believe it. There's the people that followed the Maoist line but tried to be empathetic towards other people. And then there's the people that just bullshitted on everybody else. That's lacking pan virtue. That's Fu the Enforcer. That's the other one. That's the real nasty lady, just like looking to just cut somebody during the Cultural Revolution. And Jan Wong kind of feels like she falls in this category, just feeling so bad. Now, obviously, she's not. This was a singular incident that she engaged in, and for the most part, it seems like she did no other ratting out during her time period. Now, something about modern, I've talked a lot about cultural China. Jeez, that's loud. I'm having to talk over it, so I apologize. I'm talk over the music at the pool. You can see this lovely pool behind me. Now, something about China that it's had huge amounts of upheaval since the Cultural Revolution. Now, not necessarily with some pain, but in a sense of people are on the economic move. People are looking to better themselves. People are mobile, which certainly didn't happen in Mao's time. People change their phone number many times. They move many times. They're not as traceable as they were, at least unless you have like the true insider, you work for the Politburo or something, or whatever the Chinese equivalent of that's called. It's mentioned in the book. Jan, of course, being just a reporter, has to track down Yan/Yin. And she eventually does, with the help of her friends, not before there's many sort of cultural explorations in kind of the giant malls, in kind of some of the fields that were worked, quote unquote, voluntarily, though they were forcefully, by students during the Cultural Revolution. Something about the Cultural Revolution is, even if you were considered like smart or had a high-end position, you always had to dedicate a certain number of hours to manual labor. This being the workers' paradise. That makes sense even from their perspective, even though it doesn't really make sense from maybe like what I would venture to be best for society. So yeah, she sees like malls and hotels and condo apartments that were on former fields that she used to be with, or work when she was a student there. She sees many of the old hutongs, which are like the old kind of courtyard. Well, what would often be is these winding alleyways, and then they would have like inside, they would have like inside the alleyways, you would go through a door and there would be like a courtyard, and then there would be a series of houses around this courtyard. That's a huntong. And often they were overly crowded with like 20 families for this little tiny courtyard area, and maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 15 houses or apartments that were more or less 2-room-ish. Really, really crowded. Those are all being torn down for luxury, luxury, luxury. Location, location, location. Really some of the most kind of cutting-edge architecture in the world, almost to the point where it's being criticized for being just excessively masturbatory. I don't know if you want to call it that word, on the part of the architects. Where am I at? 954. Okay. So yeah, she sees that and definitely compares it to the Cultural Revolution days. She sees many of her friends shopping for Prada, or if they can't afford it, fake Prada or fake knockoff versions of designer labels. Designer labels certainly non-existent during the Mao days of the Mao suit, one color, one size, one sex fits all. What else? You know, she talks about kind of the roads, the infrastructure development. She talks about a highway that, interestingly enough, I thought this was one of the more interesting parts of the book. Just a little anecdote. A a lot of the parks and public places in Beijing are very, very crowded, be it with bicycles or be it with even like hawkers that are trying to sell you stuff. It's just a very sort of a city in transition. So where do a lot of people go for strolls to get away from it all? They actually go to expressways that are being constructed, like above ground expressways, you know, that are 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet above the ground, that will eventually be turned into superhighways, but aren't functional yet. So you can just kind of stroll on the parts of street that are parts of the expressway that are finished while the road crew goes down the road and works on it. I thought that was an interesting story. She talks about some of the culinary traditions of China, and really I kind of got, this is kind of a conclusion that I draw that she didn't even draw during the book, but maybe one of the reasons that people in China like capitalism now more than communism is not even that they're so idealistically tied to one or the other, but the variety of food. You know, China is a country that is often driven by its stomach. Now, that can either be from a sort of enjoyment perspective, or that can also be from a starvation perspective. Well, you know, in Maoist times, when you're eating gruel every day, when there's no variation in diet, it really kind of demoralizes a country that's so culinarily based. Now, under modern capitalism, a lot of people can't afford like the nicer cuisine, but I'd even say even for the peasants, the variety of cuisine and the quality of cuisine is higher now today. You can go to a noodle shop and probably get 10 times better noodles than you could the whatever millet gruel that they were serving during Maoist times. Maybe get a little chicken in there or something. Or some soy braised duck, crispy tofu. I'm just listing stuff that is in the book at this point. The big one that comes out that I thought was actually funny, because it's more Southeast Asian than East Asian, is her friend Yin, who she eventually finds, I'll get to in a second, really loves durian, which is a Southeast Asian staple, and is just really, really stinky. One of the, kind of like a cross between rotting onions and custard, just in its taste. At least I've never had one. That's at least how it's described. But some people, it's like an acquired taste. Some people just absolutely love it. Yeah, so she eventually finds Yin, even though she has some roadblocks through kind of all the changes that have happened in Beijing, culturally, as well as just the movement of people, of time. It should also be mentioned that Yin or Yan, her name kind of varies. Even her name varies, and at the end, it actually turns out that she got rid of her last name completely. So complete name change, aside from all of the change of place and time and records and all that kind of stuff. But despite the roadblocks, she eventually finds her, and it turns out that even though Jan Wong, the author, is somewhat still guilt-ridden, she still, what was I going to say? Oh, it turns out that she was not the sole source of Yan's problems. Man, that's really loud. The sole source of Yan's problems during the Cultural Revolution, and that Yan actually approached multiple people about how to get to America. There were multiple people that ratted on her. What she didn't know is that Jan, the author, ratted on Yan or Yin or whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it. She changes her name multiple times throughout the book. She rats on her voluntarily, which previously was thought it was part of like a struggle session where they forced confessions out of people through peer pressure, or even sometimes through like physical, maybe torture, sometimes torture, but just physical kind of overwhelming people and forcing confessions upon them. And also, you know, like threats to their position as well, you know, definitely a paranoid sort of state. But it turns out that there were a lot of people that Yan talked about this dream to move to America. And it turns out that Yan's life actually was not completely destroyed, because of this encounter at Beijing. I should say this all takes place at Beijing University. They're both students there. I think I said that in the beginning. This encounter at Beijing University. You know, she had to go work hard labor for, I think it was like 5 or 6 years, but eventually slowly moved her way out until I believe a boss at a like an oil refinery or like a coal, I think it might have been like a coal refinery, where she was doing manual hard labor, needed a translator from one of the various, I think one of the various dialects or something, or maybe a stenographer for the factory. And because Yan was the only one in the factory that knew how to do that, they gave her a higher position that kind of slowly built up, and then in the last few years really accelerated to where now she is married to a prominent professor at the university that is head of one of the technical, like private, public combined enterprises in the university. Maybe not, I wouldn't say maybe not necessarily rich, but certainly in the middle upper class, and definitely just a well-respected, entrenched in academia peer in the university. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Jane feels a lot less guilty in the end. She has numerous meetings. She promises to keep up. One thing, Yan did actually make it to America for about, I think it was about 7 years, where she lived as an illegal immigrant in New York City. But because she didn't have the right papers, she was actually doing menial labor, which is sort of ironic considering she was doing menial labor. No, probably a lot worse conditioned menial labor in China, but she was doing menial labor in New York because she didn't, again, have the correct paperwork to let her excel. So eventually she moved back to China and excelled in the new China. So I guess in the end it's sort of a success story, sort of a story of the demons of our past, how we deal with them, and how we overcome them, and kind of the results that can be if you let those demons go and forgive and forget. You know, one thing that Jan, the author, mentioned towards the end of the book was just how cathartic this experience was, meeting with this woman that she thought she had, you know, ratted out. Well, I mean, so many people in China live with like the secret of the Cultural Revolution that they don't really want to bring to the forefront. Maybe the conclusion of the book is, as tough as it may be to face these things, maybe facing them can lead to a more holistic, better psyche for the people of China. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. We've kind of rambled on for a long time. So, A Comrade Lost and Found, a Beijing Story by Jan Wong. Okay, check it out, you guys. It's a good book. See you next time. Peace.